worldwide outrage over that mass abduction. The terrorist group that kidnapped nearly 300 girls now threatening to sell them.
There is no questioning how terrible sex trading and trafficking is. Although we can all agree that it is terrible to imprison anyone and force them into any life they are non-consenting to, our ancestors for centuries had been committing such crimes. Today we are still seeing these atrocities, and we are fortunate that modern acts like these are being talked about more. It's important for me to explain these events because many textbooks leave them out, and these horrific atrocities, even to this day, are being denied by the countries they occurred in. To start, we'll start with the concept of white slavery. The idea of white slavery began in 1904 when the League of Nations signed an agreement to protect women and girls. They explained that this agreement would specifically help migrant women who were leaving their countries to come to other countries in search of work. Many of these women were often misled with the temptations of work or a place to live, and in reality they were tricked into some sort of trafficking. The issue with white slavery comes from the term itself. The term white slavery is defined as trafficking of humans by use of force or deceit, or the use of drugs of white women or girls for prostitution. Obviously, you can tell there's many issues with this definition because it excluded everyone else who wasn't white. POC women during this time were thereby invisible by many laws and other enforcements that would have been put in place to protect these women. After World War II, the discussion started to focus on traffic in women to fit international issues. During World War II, we began to see something called comfort stations being made by the Japanese government. Comfort stations were essentially brothels that contained comfort women who were women from Asian countries that were either tricked into working at these brothels.
One of the most tragic stories of World War II is that of the comfort women, a polite name for the forced kidnapping or coercion of women and girls by the Japanese army to comfort their soldiers. As in many war crimes cases, comfort is a euphemism, for this was just a polite term for sexual slavery on a mass scale. Though records exist in Japan, China, Korea, Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Papua New Guinea, they are partial and only tell part of the story that Japan, to this day, is reluctant to talk about openly. However, it should be said that over the last 2 decades, they have made a greater effort to both admit their army's guilt, apologize, and make some restitution, though many of the surviving comfort women believe it was not enough. Time has gone by, and most of the victims of this atrocity have passed on, but their memory remains in the national identity of countries occupied by Japan during World War II. It's not just that the children of the comfort women are well into their old age now as well. It's that very few comfort women were able to have children after the years of sexual abuse they endured. Physically, they had been made sterile, not intentionally, but from repeated punishing abuse. Mentally, many victims could not even fathom letting a man touch them again after what they had been through. Among the many things taken from these women was the common dream of having children and grandchildren. It's estimated that nearly 500,000 women were taken from their homes to service Japanese troops during the war. Most of the women taken were poor and uneducated. Some were taken by force, literally right off the street. Some were girls who had not yet had their first period. A surprising number were lured into captivity with promises of a good-paying job elsewhere, maybe in the nearest big city, maybe in Japan. The Japanese word for comfort woman is weianfu, or comforting, consoling woman. This is hardly what it was for the women involved. Still, for historical accuracy, a small number of especially attractive women were the sole property of high-ranking Japanese officers and officials, and could possibly enjoy some of the better things in life, as long as they pleased their boss.
Next, I want to mention sex trafficking in the LGBTQ community. LGBT folk are twice as likely to be homeless, and 40% of homeless youth are LGBTQ, even though only 7% of American youth identify as LGBTQ. This is because many get kicked out of their family home and have nowhere else to go. It's estimated that 46% of LGBTQ youth will leave their home after coming out to their family. These youth are in an extremely vulnerable state. I'm going to show a video that portrays a common experience for some of these LGBTQ homeless youth.
I didn't feel safe. And I remember thinking that if I had a relationship with someone who's older, they'll be able to protect me and they'll be able to give me the support and the love that I haven't been given my entire life. The first night, Jason treated me amazing. We went to lunch, we had dinners, and then the routine changed a little bit. He said, one day you're gonna wanna live a life on your own, and I think it'd be a great idea if you got a head start. And he said, I'm a registered massage therapist. I think it would be great if you gave massages with me. We had our first appointment set. The first thing I notice is the client has no clothing on, and he's not under the sheeting that was provided. And then Jason began to take his clothing off. And I knew I had to take my clothes off.
Statistics from the Polaris Project, which is a human trafficking and education prevention organization, says that LGBTQ folk are 7 times more likely to experience acts of violence compared to heterosexuals. Also, many LGBTQ folk feel that they are unable to go to law enforcement. 50% of trans folk experience mistreatment from the police. Sadly, all of these statistics are underreported, so these numbers can be much, much higher. Next, we're going to talk about the complex situation revolving around Jeffrey Epstein. Many of you are probably aware of who Epstein was and probably have heard many conspiracy theories that revolve around that name. I'm going to be showing you a short video that better explains the situation.
Then let's talk about this news involving Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein. In a BBC interview that aired on Saturday, the Duke of York was confronted with detailed accusations from Virginia Roberts Giuffre, one of Epstein's most prominent accusers. Giuffre, among other things, has claimed that she was a sex slave of Epstein's that was forced to have sex with Prince Andrew, and the prince has been known to stay at some of Epstein's homes, fly on his private jet, and attend parties with him. And even after Epstein was hit with his sex offense conviction, the two remained in contact. And then, of course, in August, according to reports, Epstein had killed himself while in jail awaiting trial for federal sex trafficking charges involving dozens of young victims. Now, as far as these specific allegations, Giuffre has said multiple times that she was trafficked to the prince in 2001 when she was 17 years old. She has swore on her story in a court deposition and has discussed it in public interviews, saying that they had sex on 3 different occasions. And on the other side of this, you had Prince Andrew and Buckingham Palace denying her claims, calling them false and without foundation. However, the two are known to have met at some point based on the now infamous photograph that shows them together. So in Giuffre's account of their encounter, she mentioned that the Duke of York was sweating profusely while they danced at a nightclub in London. She says Prince Andrew got her alcohol and eventually took her back to Ghislaine Maxwell's home. And Maxwell, who is also pictured in the photo, is one of the women accused of helping round up these underage girls for Epstein and his friend. And so in this interview with BBC, we see Prince Andrew saying that there are issues with those claims. First, we have Andrew insisting that he had no recollection of ever meeting Giuffre.
I'm convinced that I was never in tramps with her. There are a number of things that are wrong with that story. One of which is that I don't know where the bar is in tramps. I don't drink. I don't think I've ever bought a drink in tramps whenever I was there.
He also took aim at the date of the allegation.
That couldn't have happened because the date that is being suggested, I was at home with the children.
When asked how he remembers that so clearly, he said that he remembered going to Pizza Express in Woking with his daughter earlier in the day, which was, quote, a very unusual thing for me to do. He also addressed Giuffre's comments about his sweating.
There's a slight problem with the sweating because I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time. Yes, I didn't sweat at the time because I had suffered what I would describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War when I was shot at. and I simply, it was almost impossible for me to sweat.
But the prince then went on to say that because of certain steps that he's taken in the years since, he can now sweat again. We also saw Prince Andrew stop short of saying that the 2001 photo was fake, as his friends have suggested, instead saying that he never remembers it being taken, and said that though it is clearly an image of him, he is not convinced that it is his hand around Giuffre's waist, and adding that as a member of the royal family,
public displays of affection are not something that I do. So that's the best explanation I can give you. And I'm afraid to say that I don't believe that photograph was taken in the way that has been suggested.
And also saying that he's not sure the picture of him was taken in London because he usually wears a suit and tie when traveling there. The prince also went on to say that he did not regret his friendship with Epstein, adding that the relationship has some, quote, seriously beneficial outcomes.
Do you regret the whole friendship with Epstein?
Now, still not, and the reason being is that the people that I met and the opportunities that I was given to learn, either by him or because of him, were actually very useful. Do I regret the fact that he has quite obviously conducted himself in a manner unbecoming? Yes.
Unbecoming? He was a sex offender.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm being polite, in the sense that he was a sex offender.
Although Epstein is dead, the importance of understanding what Epstein did is still relevant because many of his close friends are still high-ranking members of society, and by no means should anyone who condone this kind of behavior be in power. Today, the last thing we're going to talk about, which is arguably the most annoying garbage human, Andrew Tate. Tate is a former kickboxing champion turned massive misogynist influencer. Earlier this year, we learned that Tate had an underground webcam ring where he would bring women to his house under the impression they were in a relationship with Tate. Then they would be forced to produce pornography. Here is a clip better explaining Tate.
Kickboxer turned controversial influencer Andrew Tate finds himself in hot water over allegations of sex trafficking at his Romanian home. Bombshell news of Tate's apparent arrest broke Thursday night as reports say he was holding two women against their will at his villa. Tate's attorney, though, he has a different story, instead saying his client was simply detained for 24 hours. The Directorate for Investigating Organized Crime and Terrorism says the suspects organized a criminal group spanning between Romania, the UK, and the US. As for the allegations against Tate, reports say two women, one American and one Romanian, were being held against their will and even subjected to physical violence and mental coercion. Authorities say the suspects misled the woman to, quote, believing that they intended to enter into a marriage/cohabitation relationship. After that, they said the women were exploited. To top it all off, a now deleted post from Tate's website seems to brag about activities adjacent to sex trafficking, claiming 75 women work for him and that he is, quote, the most competent person on the entire planet to teach you about male-female interactions. The post goes on to say it became his job to meet a girl, sleep with her, and, quote, test if she's quality, get her to fall in love with me, to where she do anything I say.
A lot of guys say that I'm a pimp and I exploit girls, and then some other guys understand it from my angle, and that's, I've never forced anyone to do anything they don't want to do.